Hello, it's Book Quote Wednesday and the word is self. What is space opera without a little mystery too? Today I'm reading from my space opera novel PHOENECIA'S WORLDS. The colony world of La Nueva Temporada survived disaster for the moment by the skin of its teeth, but to escape certain destruction, to ensure its long-term survival, it has to throw itself on the mercy and goodwill of the people of Earth, which they doubt will come naturally, so they have had to take steps to ensure they get it anyway. And now Jo Odembo, who is the Constable of Earth's High-Kili space station, is coming to suspect that the Nuevans' plucky survival story is just a little too pat, perhaps. So, Chapter 15, Nasty Suspicious Minds. Jo got back to the office on High-Kili just as her constable was heading for the door. From his stricken look, she guessed Bob had been about to take advantage of her absence and bung off early from his shift. He recovered quickly, and she pretended not to notice. "How was it?" he asked. She dropped down into her chair and looked speculatively at him. The entire wall behind her showed a real-time view down the cable towards Earth. It was night across Africa, and it looked as if the silver line disappeared into the dark, hit something, and broke up into speckles of light, the lights of the Kentanmos megalopolis that sprawled along the east coast. The view kept Jo focused on where she had come from and where she hoped to return one day on her own terms, though when she had busted one bad guy too many and the clan gave her 24 hours to leave, the hint had been strong that she shouldn't even dream of coming back until a lot of people had either died of natural causes or otherwise moved on. How was it, she thought. The question was meaningless, just his usual conversational seed. Where to start? She held his gaze just long enough to make him shift a little, wondering what he had done wrong. "Coffin failure," she said. "Yes?" The long sleep coffins were stripped down and rebuilt, their self-sustaining, built-in redundancy as far as the eye can see. If there's to be a failure rate, you'd expect it to be low, wouldn't you? "Yes," he said again, carefully, like a man with a toe dipped into the conversation, not quite sure how deep or heated it might suddenly become. And it was low, 4 out of 2,000. A fifth of 1%, she reminded herself again. Bob pulled a figure from headspace. 23 never woke up on the original Phoenicia mission, he pointed out. 23 out of 10,000, she agreed. It was a similar figure, a fifth of 1%, give or take. But... "Go home, Bob," she said. She suddenly felt very tired. "I'll close up." "Right." She dropped down into her chair and he darted for the exit. "And you're on night call," she added over her shoulder. "Right," he muttered, a little less pleased, and the door closed. Well, there was no point in not being a bit of a bastard if he had the rank for it. Night call meant that if any emergencies arose while the office was closed for the day, he would be the one contacted. Whereupon, of course, he would contact her, but her sleep would be undisturbed for a little longer. Jo leaned forward and rested her head against the desktop. Crappity, 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 crap. It wasn't just the deaths. It wasn't just that one of them was a kid. Note to self, the 3 Terrans who also died might have families who would need notifying. It was the realisation that making a pointless trip out to the starship, which could just as well have been done through Headspace, to record 4 deaths, which could just as well have been handled by a black box from the coroner's office, was the highlight of her month? No, more than that, year at least. In fact, today's contrived distraction was quite possibly the highlight of her career. God, how boring was her career likely to be? Extremely, if current science were anything to go by. It was a sad fact of life that there was only one chief constable of the orbital police force. The way to get to chief was to be commander of one of the 4 big stations, High-Kili, Atahualpa, Garuda, Basile. The way to be commander of a station was first to be one of its sergeants. But commanders tended to hang around for a long time, not creating any further vacancies, and chief was such a plush job that whoever got it tended to stay forever, pulling up the ladder for their contemporaries and only creating a vacancy for the next generation down. She sighed and called the first of the dead Terra names out of Headspace. She could squeeze a bit more official activity into the end of the day. List known relatives of Catherine Trink, last known whereabouts La Nueva Temporada. Headspace told her there were no known relatives on Earth. Well, that made the job slightly easier. List known relatives of Samuel Ahudi, last known whereabouts La Nueva Temporada. No known relatives located. Jo sat up, frowned, sent off the request for the third name. No known. For goodness sake, she murmured. She thought for a moment, then picked 3 names at random from the list of surviving Terran passengers. Then 3 more, and another 3 after that. All had family, a spouse, a child, a parent at least, usually more. Maybe 1/5 of 1% dying was the statistical norm, but what were the odds of the 3 dead Terrans being the only ones not to have any surviving family at all? It was too late, she was too tired, she would come back to this. She came back to it in the middle of the night. Jo had gone to bed, turned off the lights, and had the kind of sleep where she was convinced she hadn't slept for hours, until she remembered getting out of bed in the middle of long sleep chamber A, and her mother being on Phoenicia, saying all the things that Zabo had said to her earlier, and strolling down the ship's spine in the sunlight. So she probably had slept a little. The last straw was Ara Zabo, apparently standing next to her in her room, with his broad, flat smile of satisfaction. We have the ship. Jo's eyes opened into the darkness. Yes, team leader, you certainly do, she murmured. Phoenicia was built to fly between solar systems and established colony worlds, and it was programmed to do it in one way only. It would give unswerving loyalty to its designated master until its mission was accomplished or its master died, in which case it changed its loyalty to the nearest civil administration. She remembered Zabo's complaints about the ship's lack of cooperation. If the Terrans now owned Phoenicia, it seemed to be news to the ship itself. She dug a little deeper into Headspace, looking back through publicly available records. She soon found that it wasn't just Zabo. It questioned traffic control. It had been very reluctant even to let the hired sort of people on in the first place. In fact, Phoenicia was showing no signs of loyalty at all to any government or public body of Earth. Yet it also claimed to have personally ejected the body of its master, Alejandro Mateo, into space. In mission year 27, it really should be aware that its master was dead. It could just be a case of black box psychosis, simultaneously holding 2 contradictory beliefs in its mind. It happened. Or... Jo snorted. It was a nasty, suspicious thought based on the flimsiest of evidence, as she is probably still delirious from dreamland and not thinking clearly. And while there were times in her line of work where the nasty, suspicious mind was a positive asset, this probably wasn't one of them. So instead she asked a question she really should have asked earlier. Zabo had said Mateo was ship's master? Query, how did a 19-year-old become ship's master? Headspace quickly told her the story, retrieved and synchronized from the ship's own archives. How Alejandro Mateo was the reluctant junior partner in an enterprise founded by his older brother, and what with one thing and another, he was the one to come to Earth. She also glanced at the sketchy data on the kid's father, Tomas Mateo, the man who made the speech. Planetary director, eh? That certainly sounded grand. By definition, he must be a successful politician. She would bet he also had a nasty, suspicious mind. Jo had the strangest feeling there were threads here, but as yet she had no reason to tie them together. But she will. Remember, you can buy my books at www.benjeeps.com. See you next time.